Hi there, and thanks for joining us for Wildflowers Live this Sunday, January 10th, 2021. This is Patricia Lucia, author of Wildflowers and Present Tenses, and what follows is a conversation with my co-host about the story Her in my collection of short stories, Wildflowers and Present Tenses. So we talk about the story Her, and we also talk a lot about twin flames and wounded lovers and multiple lifetimes, because that's what this story is all about. It's about love and often heartbreak through lifetimes. Join me with my co host, Taylor Callahan, for episode 2 of Wildflowers Live.
This has always been one of my absolute favorites. Her, as it's titled, it really depicts something that I think every person has at least one of in this lifetime. And I told Patti, I'm like, I hate the word twin flames. I think that it gets taken out of context a lot in today's world.
Yeah.
We're all grasping at this twin flame ideal. But I think that there are special souls and special relationships in each life that define our soul, or that hold a piece of us. And this is one of those relationships.
Yeah. There are folks who don't really believe in multiple lifetimes, and they think that might be kind of weird. I just wanted to start from there and also just let people, because the twin flame thing is also, it's kind of related to lifetimes, and this belief in that we kind of come back and move the progress of our souls along a little bit more each lifetime. And I firmly believe that. And I just wanted to share that concept was introduced to me very young. And even though my mother is a devout Catholic, she used to read Edgar Cayce. And right. And that was my first introduction. Actually, it was my first introduction to the beings known as Arcturians. So that kind of just was like, wow, And so my mother had certain perspectives. There were certain things that she loved about Edgar Cayce, and then other things, she put aside, but I kind of gobbled them up. And one of the things that he said that, and always stuck with me, was he said that our souls, these people who are in our lives, in our sphere, in our lives, particularly the closest relationships, what we do is we kind of, in one lifetime to the next, we kind of pick up where we left off in the last lifetime, and
the last lesson.
Yes, and we move it along a little further. And so we are kind of, those who are particularly close in our lives, we kind of, we could be considered soul family, some twin flames, and we'll talk about the difference between the two. But we are kind of helping, we're kind of co-evolving, we're kind of working together to evolve our souls, to work through karma and so forth, from lifetime to a lifetime. So that's my belief. It may not be the belief system that people embrace who are listening, but that's kind of my.
I was quite young at my introduction to past lives as well. It was through Brian Weiss,
right?
Who worked at Mount Sinai Hospital in Miami as a psychiatrist, and essentially stumbled across past life regression on accident. Past lives, one of his patients, and it was something that felt so right and so good to my soul, that I never stopped holding on to that.
Right.
And after having regressions, it blows your mind. And then having children, and my children looking at me, without being taught anything specifically about it, able to tell me about their past lives.
Right.
Before they even knew what they were,
Right.
My middle son, I remember he was like 5, came up to me and began to tell me about this life he had before he came here to my belly. And it sounded like he was reading from The Little House on the Prairie. He was a dad of a lot of children. There was a dirt floor. It was just unbelievable to hear this coming out of my 5-year-old's mouth.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, as I got older and my kids, you know, began to show me that I think that it's innate, it's within us. And
yeah. I mean, they say that when we're very young, you know, in the first few years of our lives, we remember more.
The veil is still thin.
Well, you know, where we were before.
We haven't been untaught all the way yet.
Yeah, exactly. No, exactly. Well, I do think we all go through a forgetting process. You know, that is part of I think the agreement coming into this world is that, you know, we kind of go through the forgetting process. I just wanted to, people have different concepts of twin flames. And I wanted to share with you something that I heard, or that I looked up. I was like, oh man, so we're going to talk about twin flames. I should, you know, kind of get my shit together here and, you know, kind of maybe look up some things so that things are clear. And I found it very, very interesting. You know, so you can Google anything and whatever. And even though we have a sense of it, I wanted to kind of look at kind of the general common thinking of it. And so there are traits and qualities that are listed for, you know, like how to tell if somebody is your twin flame. So you want to hear this?
Wow.
Okay, here we go. So, you know, if you're in a relationship and it has all or some of these qualities, then, you know, you may be in a twin flame relationship. So, and the understanding here, and I'm not saying I really agree with all of this, but, you know, the twin flame concept is that a twin flame is actually another part of your soul, that your soul has been split. And so your soul is actually, you know, part of your soul is occupying another person. And that is why, you know, it's so intense when you come together. And a lot of people believe there's only one twin flame, you know, you just have that other half, right? But I actually think sometimes our souls are, you know, there could be parts of our souls that are in many. I don't think we just have one twin flame. I think we can have many.
I agree.
Yeah, we can have many.
I think the correct answer is many.
Many, I would agree.
And they can look like a lot of different things.
Absolutely.
They can look like lovers. They can look like friends. They can look like family.
Yeah.
It does not always mean your partner.
Yes, though they do tend to go that way. And so let me give you some of the things that were listed here, and I thought it was really interesting. They are generally relationships that are marked by being very tumultuous.
Tumultuous is a fantastic word to use.
Yes, they are also extremely intense relationships. They are relationships that feel magnetic. You know, like there's and you have to understand, like, if that's the concept where you have these two parts of a soul, of course, there's going to be a very strong magnetism, right? Because it's like you know, and that would probably be the only time that I would agree with that stupid Tom Cruise line from that stupid movie. I complete you, you complete me. I think, you know, that might be more accurate in twin flame relationships. But at any rate, so insecurities and doubts are amplified. Dear Lord, yes. These are relationships that often keep coming back. So they can be relationships that are in and out, on and off, in and out, on and off. And this could go on, you know, you could be separated for months, you could be separated for years, you could be separated for decades. And it's kind of like, it can be an in and out kind of experience. It feels as though the connection has been brought together from a higher purpose. It may, you know, like it feels like there might have been some kind of divine intervention in the bringing together of these two people.
Some synchronistic way of meeting or reconnecting. I feel it has a magical vibe about it. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Another is clear psychic connection. where you feel like you kind of know when what the other person is thinking, or there's like this psychic connection that is very evident often in these relationships, and that inevitably these relationships are really about pushing us to be and do better.
Mm.
So, I kind of looked at the list and went check, 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 check.
Yeah, you got to push each other.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So hopefully, I mean, I will say, so not all twin flame relationships, you need to be lovers with, but often because of the intensity that happens, and of course, in more intimate relationships, all of these qualities that we just talked about are going to be even more intensified.
Yeah.
So, and that's kind of a twin flame relationship. Now, when, the difference apparently between twin flame relationships and say soulmates is that, the soulmate, you do have that kind of beautiful connection, but it isn't like they are a twin flame relationship where they are literally another part of your soul that feels like it is reconnecting.
Right.
So that's a different kind of
And we also have soul family.
Yeah.
And my belief system and yours. So it's not necessarily family. It could be a stranger that you help on the street, you make eye contact with one time in your life, that was the contract you had with that person.
Yeah.
Soul family that waits after they pass or you pass, you wait for each other to meet in the middle before you decide, when you're coming back.
Absolutely.
And I think soulmate kind of falls into that realm as well.
Yeah. So we'll jump into this, and there's a whole lot more that we can talk about. And of course, I'll invite people, if you're joining us in the Zoom room, Taylor and I are going to share some of the story, and we are going to, and then we're going to just kind of open it up for folks to share their stories if they have twin flame stories, or want to make comments. That sound pretty good, Taylor?
That sounds great. Are you going to start with the crown?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
So as people probably know, this book, The Wildflowers and Present Tenses, is a collection of short stories, and the narrator is a crone who is my future self, who is sitting by the fire telling these stories to an audience of fairies. And what she does is she introduces each story, but from a perspective of, a future, wiser, wilder, more courageous crone. And so the story that we're sharing today is, the title is Her, with parentheses around that. And we'll get to why there are parentheses around that. So, and the identity of this person is anonymous, and that is because this is a person who cherishes her privacy, and I will also do the same and cherish her privacy. So the crone opens up the story. She says, "I was naive to think," said the crone, "that my twin flame must be my lover." She laughs and takes a drink from the bottle, then pours a generous amount in a glass and places it on the log next to her. Our souls thrashed about like magnets inside our bodies whenever we stood close, but we burnt the shit out of each other the moment we became lovers. Maybe we burnt through karma. Maybe we healed old wounds by singeing them. Maybe we needed the chaos of the fire to wrestle our own demons. She adds a log to the fire and pushes embers around it with her stick. The fairies dip their fingers in their libation, taste it, then lean over the edge of the glass to drink greedily. The crone pulls a worn, yellowed paper from her poncho, unfolds it, and carefully smooths out the creases. She closes her eyes and travels back to a younger self who sits at a desk with her head in her hands. So the crone is kind of going back to the memory of her younger self at the moment that she is writing this story. So I thought, Taylor, I thought I would just kind of start off. I know we talked about like the way it begins is, like that first paragraph really says a lot. So I was going to start there.
Absolutely.
All right. I thought I had found peace in my memories of her. I had forgiven myself, faced my shadows, and let go. But as I write this, my heart sinks again. My head finds its way to my hands, and I close my eyes to the vision of my younger self, so unaware of my wounds that I treated love like a solicitor, or worse, a thief. She had her own wounds, but the love she brought to my door was as real as she could manage, and I, drawn to her like an exotic, beautiful bird, thought my love was real too. So that's the beginning. And I thought that I know, Taylor, you wanted me to read the part about, you want me to read all of it, but the part about first coming into her home, being invited to her home. And
yeah, it's the imagery is so beautiful.
Okay. And then, of course, so this was, from the beginning, this, was a relationship that kind of went in and out, on and off. And I had no idea what to make of it. And of course, I was very early in my spiritual journey. And there were so many things that I didn't understand, until many years later, actually. So the next part I'm going to read is, she was very careful about inviting me to her home. Like she put a lot of thought into it and took a lot of care. And usually, I mean, especially, okay, let's be honest, especially with women, there's that joke, right? What does a lesbian bring to her second date? A U-Haul. Um, right? So we're kind of known for kind of jumping right in. But she was different, and it was weeks, and it was very thoughtful, planned out. I had no idea what the preparation was, but then she did. She invited me to her home, and there was something really, obviously, really magical about that. So that's the part that I'm going to read. She did not invite me to her home when we became lovers. She waited weeks preparing for my arrival. She stood in the driveway to greet me the evening I arrived at her little two-story cottage. Prayer flags and plants hung across the front porch. A little table with two chairs nestled under a hexagonal window that looked like a porthole on a ship. Just above the porch, a stained glass window depicted three wooden sailboats at sea. Her little cottage was a sea vessel, I mused. She took my hand and led me inside. Welcome to my home, she said. We stepped into the kitchen, and the smell of coffee and cardamom greeted me. A collection of CDs occupied one whole wall in the step-down living room, and old framed album covers of Cat Stevens and Sandy Dennis, two musicians closer to my generation than hers, hung on another. Her cats raised their heads from between the rungs of the stairs and followed our movement below them. She introduced each one by name and took me by the hand up the stairs, stopping at a little table on the landing to light incense. I saw the stained glass window from the inside above her headboard. A bell on the end of a long ribbon hung from the ceiling at the top of the stairs. She explained it was important to have a bell there for feng shui so love would not fall down the stairs. She rang the bell. And yeah, so I'll stop there.
I just love it. You can tell that she took her time
Mm-hmm.
preparing for your arrival.
Mm-hmm.
and then it was so special. It's relatable. Her making a ritual, essentially making a ritual out of that first experience, stopping to light the incense, so that the smell of sandalwood wafted up the stairs. I think that the intentional acts.
It was sacred. It was sacred.
Yeah.
And this was a concept that was
wanted it to be a ritual, a sacred moment.
Yeah. You could tell. And that was something that was foreign to me. I was completely drawn to it, but I didn't really understand it. Like I did my best to understand what was going on and to appreciate and to take in all that was all in those moments, but it was something I was unfamiliar with. That is not the way that I had, conducted myself in relationships.
Right.
I'll be honest.
But the way she was treating you was like a prayer.
Yes. And again, not something that I was used
familiar
to.
with.
No, not at all. I was, but very, very drawn to it. You wanted to read the part of going to the forest and returning?
I do. This part, it really reached out to my soul. It is, once again, very relatable. I relate to her a lot. I think a little bit of that fairy essence that she carries is very familiar to me. And so this is kind of one of those moments. So I'll start from, I've always been drawn to sad women, maybe for self-protection, but there is a danger in falling in love with a heartbroken woman whose emotions pool in past tenses. Another woman had once watered these flowers, shared morning coffee, and kissed her breasts. Another woman had been her wife. She was unsure about us and decided to go to the mountains to think, to collect all the pieces of her heart and let the magic of the forest make it whole again. She sent pictures of the early autumn trees and sunsets from the Smoky Mountains. I smoked too many clove cigarettes with my morning coffee and waited anxiously for her return, more anxiously for her decision. She returned on an afternoon and called from the highway. I was behind the counter of my coffee house, frothing milk for 2 cappuccinos when she entered, the bell on the front door ringing her arrival. Those bells.
Yes.
I served the 2 women at the counter and looked behind them where she had stood peering out from behind an enormous bouquet of wildflowers. She looked as wild and flushed as the flowers and rushed in to kiss me as the women, startled and curious, looked on. When they left, she locked the door behind them and pulled me to the floor behind the counter. I was hers and she was mine.
Are you crying? You're crying, aren't you?
A little bit. It's so beautiful and romantic, and I also think that something happens there, something that I like to call an aleph.
Yes.
Read the book by Paulo Coelho. Go Google the word. But you all were opening a portal and behind that counter on the floor there. It wasn't a aleph. And in that moment, for both of you, you were whole. It was this whole moment of togetherness, where you kind of just accepted the other. And there's so much significance and disappearing to the mountains. I live in the Smoky Mountains, so
yeah. So you know exactly you live in those mountains,
she
girl.
Was going for and what that does for your soul.
Yeah.
And I could see her picking these wildflowers before returning home to hand deliver them to you. And for me, I love that for you. Because you deserved that. You deserve that kind of love. And so I get emotional when I read that.
Yeah.
Because
it's actually, it's what's heartbreaking in a lot of ways about this
the
is
most heartbreaking part of it all.
What was the most heartbreaking part of it all?
That you both accepted each other in that moment.
Yeah, though I think as much as, you know, you like you say, you know, I deserve that kind of love. I didn't know.
Believe that you deserve that
Yeah,
kind of love.
I couldn't,
Right.
you know, I was, and it was, and that was some of you know, and that was some of the most painful, those are some of the most painful moments in the relationship, when I kind of kept screwing, like, you know, like I kept either missing it or misinterpreting it or not believing it or suspecting it, you know, when she expressed that kind of love to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's really, you know, that's kind of some of the real, I think those are some of the memories that I had to, like, those are some of the things that I had to forgive myself about, you know, was that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Was
those.
those.
It's hard not to self-protect.
Yeah.
Especially when you have your own past tenses.
Yeah.
Waiting for her to make her mind up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that there was a lot going on there already.
Mm-hmm.
And this was really prior to the most tumultuous parts of that relationship. This is kind of the beginning of that.
Yeah.
But I just love that part of the story where you all are able to embrace and choose each other in that moment.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that was kind of what, there were so many things that were significant, but you know, like the aspect of poetry in our relationship. So there was this thing about how, I mean, this woman was brilliant, and she wanted to be a linguist, and I think in a lot of ways she's like like, she didn't go to school to be a linguist, but I think for all intents and purposes she is, because she is so steeped in language.
Which is interesting when she says, I wish I could write poetry.
Yes, I wish I could write poetry. And I found this so startling. It's like, what do you mean? What do you mean you can't?
Which you responded,
yes,
you are poetry.
You are poetry. And so it prompted me to write a poem. And the thing is like, I'm always writing, you know, I sit down and just, I'm a writer. I just write poetry, and I'm not saying it's really good. I'm just saying, like, I just write, you know, poetry. It's kind of natural to me. So, and this was a poem actually that was very inspirational, that was on the bathroom wall in my coffee house for a while, because I loved it so much. And of course, after we had parted, it was a poem that, you know, was always like a piece of, you know, piece of her, or a piece of us that was there. And so it's yeah. Do you want me to read it? You want me to read my, okay. When my love said, I wish I could write poetry, I said, you are poetry. And when this made her smile, I said, see, there, another poem.
That's how her moved. She moved in poetry.
Yes.
She spoke in poetry.
Yes.
She was a poet because she was poetic in nature. She embodied poetry.
Right.
And you could see that.
Oh, completely. It was like a no-brainer. I couldn't believe that she had said that.
Yeah.
You know. And so there were these stops and starts in our relationship, and some of them were really tragic. We don't really have to go into all of the details, but there was a moment where we parted. It was a very intense parting that we had done, and she called me a few days later, and she said she had something for me. And so I'm going to just read the introduction, but I know you wanted to read the poem. So this is a woman who said she wishes she could write poetry, and what she did shortly after that was stunning. So just so everybody knows, Taylor is pregnant and very, very hormonal. So
I'm emotional regardless.
You are, and I love that so much about you. So I'm just going to read the intro to it, and then we can talk a little bit about the poem. You can share the poem. A few days later, and this was after this kind of intense parting. A few days later, she called and asked me asked to see me. She had something she wanted to give me. Had I left something behind that she needed to return? I thought. Did she need to purge all evidence of me from her home? I had spent the last few days slogging through the mud of my own shame. She had been busy with another endeavor. When I arrived, she gave me a piece of paper, a poem, her first poem, and the only poem ever written to me by a lover. This stunned me because I am expecting, and this is my woundedness, right? I'm expecting her to like have a cardboard box with some odds and ends I might have left at her place. Here, take your stuff, right? That's the typical, right? Or something. But like that's what I was expecting. And what she had been doing over those days was she was writing this poem.
It's such a good example of how we berate, just attack ourselves in these really, really tender moments of our life.
Yeah.
Everyone does this. That inner voice, like all the things you did wrong or could have changed, and that shame becomes blame, and
absolutely, and guilt.
And in the interim of that, we've got it all wrong. We have weaved this story in our minds that is inevitably hurting us more.
Yes, we're breaking our own hearts.
We're breaking our own hearts, and here she was with this poem to prove you wrong, to show you how she was holding you. Noblesse Lumiere. Pardon my French.
That's actually that means noble light, and that's actually my name. So she was one of the first people to point out to me that my name, Patricia Lucia, means noble light.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mythic golden light of morning, fog, sleep, smile, and sweet, supple arches. You are the gasp of a baby's wonder. You are the watching eye of the cat. You are the minuscule millimeter of this day's sunflower. You are the seed born on this wind's whisper. I love this next line because if you know Patti, you understand the clarity this gives. You are the oil and onion in the pan. You are the deep sigh after tears long bottled. You are the flash of 1 million synapses firing. You are the low rumble of firework thunder. You are the abandon to dance in doorways. You are the thread of smoke curling fingertips. You are the hope of a humble apostle. And I'm going to butcher this, but
it's in French. The last line is in French.
Vos guider mon courir avec mains paisanes.
Paysans.
Which means, Patti?
You heal my heart with your peasant hands.
You heal my heart with your peasant hands. Woo!
Yeah.
For her first poem. I think she got the gist of how that works.
I think so. I think
it speaks for itself.
Yeah. So again, a relationship that kind of went in and out, was very, very tumultuous, ended, started back up, ended again.
You guys went through this coming and going of each other.
Yeah.
And even still, even when you went on your own path, you still somehow found each other over and over again. To where you were, getting cheered on as you lowered baskets of goodies and lit on champa for her as she passed by on her bicycle early in the morning.
Yeah.
Even after you had another partner.
Yeah. And she did too. Yeah.
And I'm sure vice versa.
Yeah.
It was unavoidable. And it still became tumultuous.
Yes.
Still ended in scuff marks on bedside. But
Yes.
but there are moments in a relationship that are little moments. But those little moments sometimes seem like the biggest moments in hindsight.
Yeah.
And I think that her calling you on that evening to talk her to sleep. I think we've all had that experience,
Yeah.
with a lover, or even a crush where, hey, just talk to me, and then you fall asleep on the phone.
Yeah.
But in those moments, I think there are special messages to and for our souls. And I think that perhaps that was one for you.
Yeah, it was kind of one of those moments where I had, for some reason, she wanted me to talk her to sleep. And so I talked until she was asleep. And then I stayed on the phone because something inside me wanted to just stay on the phone. I wanted to
be with her.
I wanted to be with her. It says, I could have hung up, but I didn't. I stayed on the phone listening to her breathe, then laid beneath my covers and kept the phone to my ear. I fought sleep. I wanted to will myself into her dreams, fly with her into some flickering dream space above the aurora borealis. Years later, I dreamt about that night. I talked her to sleep. In the dream, I had stayed on the phone long enough for my soul to take a picture. I woke from the dream with an unusual insight that the moments a soul wants to remember are quite different from the moments we think are important: birthdays, holidays, graduations, vacations. In my dream, my soul wanted to take a picture of the particular slant of the earth and the location of the stars at the moment she fell asleep. One day, I might look through a scrapbook during my life review and find that picture. Maybe from my soul's perspective, this was singularly the most important moment in our relationship. So, yeah.
Full body goosebumps.
Yeah.
And so you, in that moment, were her prayer. You were taking a photo with your soul's eye.
Right. Of that particular moment.
That you can look back on for lifetimes to come.
Yeah. And I thought,
maybe,
yeah.
In future lifetimes when you all, you and her have met and looked back together, been like, hey, you remember that moment?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm so glad we did that.
And it's interesting because I've thought about this and I wonder sometimes if when you have twin flames, is it possible for there to be moments when the twin flame souls can unite in dream time? Like is dream time a time when the two can come together in ways that they cannot come together when in waking? And so was that why that moment was so important? I don't know. It's just things that I ponder.
Yes, it was like a door opening to hold that connection or hold that space.
Right.
For you to go back to that moment and be able to connect in that way.
Right.
I do believe that we do have those experiences in dream time. I believe that dream time allows us to connect with people, our twin soul, our soulmates, twin flames, past life experiences. All of that can come through our dream time.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes, and I did it in a funny way in that little video about the, about, exes coming into our dreams. But is it?
Oh, it happened.
Yeah. Yes, I know. But is it possible that, that sort of thing is coming on? Because, there are certain people who come into my dreams. So you have been in my dreams. Bridget, my other spirit daughter has been in my dreams, and so has she. So has, this woman been in my dreams. And when she appears, there's often a lesson There's often she's calling my attention to something. And I'm usually like a dork or dunce. I'm like, what? What? Like that. But I do find that that is interesting. Is usually when she appears in a dream, it's to call my attention to something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think that's, that's pretty significant. So I imagine she will, continue to kind of pop in on a dream from time to time. I just wanted to do the very last part. And so um, over the years, uh, I have, we've communicated like through text. We haven't seen each other. We haven't been in each other's presence, but there's an occasional text or whatever. And I always kind of wish her happy birthday in May. I send her a little text, and I noticed that she started sending her responses with parentheses around the responses, and I thought this is really unusual because this is a woman who she knows her language, she knows punctuation, she doesn't mess around. Like she's very specific, she's very particular. And so I wondered what the significance was of the parentheses around her responses. So I'm just going to read a you know a little a little bit of that. Her response to my birthday wishes looked like, thank you, Patty. I thought this was odd because she had always been particular about language and punctuation. What was the point of the parentheses? This remained a mystery until I returned to teaching after my coffee house closed. One day, while teaching the E. E. Cummings poem, I Carry Your Heart, to my students, I discussed Cummings' rebellious nature and how he challenged traditional form and punctuation usage. I was in the middle of explaining that Cummings used parentheses in I Carry Your Heart to represent two hands holding a heart when I suddenly remembered her unusual use of parentheses in text messages. My students sat quietly while I stood in silence in the front of the class with my hands cupped like two parentheses. Perhaps she knew that I would eventually figure it out, or perhaps it didn't matter to her whether I did or not. It was her quiet gesture. So,
Sorry to laugh, but I
no,
just I can see you sitting.
standing. No, standing. Yeah, standing. There I was. Yeah, kind of frozen.
Stunned with your hands out in parentheses. Oh shit.
Yeah, with not really right. I couldn't really explain.
Probably like, excuse me, Miss Lucia, you good?
Yeah, no kidding. Couldn't really explain that one to him.
And that's not something you can be like, well, students,
You see, well,
a long time
a long time ago.
ago. You just gotta let that one.
Gotta let that one go. Gotta let them think you had a moment like a.
Like, holy shit, I get it now.
Yep.
And I hope that she reads this story and is able to giggle at that.
I hope she giggles too.
Because if you haven't read the E. E. Cummings poem, I Carry Your Heart, highly recommend you go do so.
It's beautiful.
It's a very beautiful poem. But I hope that she's able to giggle at the imagery of Patti standing there stunned, like, oh shit, now I get it.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And I don't think it mattered for her whether you ever got it or not.
No.
I think that was for her.
That was for her.
No. Her love for you.
Yeah. And so that that's a story, and there is another story with her, and that is the Dharma story towards the end. But I decided to dedicate the book to her, and in a lot of ways, the thinking behind it was that I had so much gratitude for how much I learned at that time and how much I've learned in retrospect and looking back on that and all that I've learned over the years. Like she has continued to inspire me to live my best life and my most honest life. And I think that she probably never knew that. And so it's also my way of moving our relationship as far along in the healing process as I can in this lifetime, so that in the next, when we come together again, it will be more healed. And that's kind of what I hope to do with all my relationships, is kind of move them along, heal them, or in some cases release them, in preparation for the next life.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that was her. And I am going to just remind people, if you are interested in getting my book, you can get a 15% discount on my website, pattiluciawrites.com. If you are in a book club or you're doing an event and you want to read the book and you would like me to speak at your book club, you can contact me. I would love to come by and speak. If you've read the book and you want to write a review, I ask people to go to Amazon or Barnes and Noble and write a review, because that really helps get the book out. All right. And the second book in this series, Wildflowers and Wooden Spoons, is coming out in 2021. That is a cookbook with all of the signature recipes from the cafe that I owned for 10 years. And then, of course, all kinds of cafe stories, which I'm sure um, people will enjoy those stories.
That's going to be so juicy.
It's
The
going to be so
recipes
juicy.
and the story.
Yeah.
So good.
I know, it's going to be awesome. Next week, we are going to talk about Coffee with Cleo and Company. I did have a friendship with the woman known mostly as Miss Cleo, and it was a fascinating and also a tumultuous friendship. I wrote a story about that relationship, and it's kind of fascinating. It's fascinating to have a friendship with a voodoo priestess. There was so much that I learned from that relationship, and I find it really interesting. I have, because I'm an English teacher, I've taught the Crucible, which is Salem, and that whole story began with a woman very similar to Cleo, named Tatuba, having her little ritual in the forest that was kind of basically these young girls from the village, stupid girls, teenage girls, kind of crashed her ritual, and then all hell broke loose in Salem. So we'll talk a little bit about that next week. And Taylor, you're gonna join me to co-host that. I think we're going to have some other folks joining us who had personal relationships with Cleo while she was hanging out at my coffee house during those years.
Absolutely. I think that personal stories are super important
Yeah.
when it comes to Cleo, because she was
Yeah,
a very powerful entity
she
of a
was.
woman.
Yeah.
I can hear her laughing, and I can smell the black and mild
Yeah, the black and miles
just
and the
talking
yeah.
about her.
Yeah, so she will probably be joining that conversation as well in her own way. So yeah, so we'll get into that and what it's like to kind of have a friendship with such a character. We'll do that next week. So I want to thank people for joining us today. If you have not already gotten the book and you'd like to pick up a copy of Wildflowers and Present Tenses, you can go to pattiluciawrites.com for a discount in the hardcover. So this is the hardcover, but if you like ebooks, hop on to Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Kobo, and pick up your ebook there. So this has been Taylor, and I just want to end by saying, Taylor is a soul connection for me too. We have spent many, many lifetimes together. We both agree that not so much twin flame, not a twin flame situation, but definitely soul family. And I think
we've like reversed all sorts of roles, and I think
yes,
Inoki can agree. She's like in that group too.
yeah.
There's just a group of people from those days at the cafe that we've all kind of exchanged positions as
Yeah.
to what role we were playing
Yeah.
in this particular life. But their mother, lover, daughter, son, cousin. I think that that there's a myriad
Yeah.
of
We've played all the
different
roles.
that
Yeah.
have been played.
Yeah. Over the many, many lifetimes that
Absolutely.
we've lived. And I think that there's a certain sense of that when you have relationships like that in your life. There's a certain ease to it because there's a sense of timelessness. Like we're good. We've done we've worked through all of our stuff, you know. We've worked through a whole lot of karma together. We've seen so much together. We've experienced so much together, and now we can just really enjoy our time together and love each other and
Just be anchors for
yeah,
each other.
just be anchors
Yeah.
for each other and just appreciate that here we are again. Our lives are intersecting and we're sharing the journey again, in different form, in different roles. And it's beautiful. It's a beautiful journey. I feel so privileged to have those kind of people in my life. And Taylor, you certainly are one of them. So much appreciation for you. Much appreciation for you, sweetie.
Absolutely. And I second all of that right back at you. I wanna just add one more thing from her.
Absolutely. Oh, okay.
It's something that I also ask people. But I want to just leave everyone with something that I'd like to ask you. Because, you know, there's a lot of pain in this story. There's a lot of beauty and a lot of romance and a lot of, you know.
And a lot of pain, yeah.
A lot of pain.
Mm-hmm.
But I just want to leave everyone with, how is your heart? How is your heart?
Yeah.
That's something that
that's what she would ask.
Right to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's such an important question.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to finish with that.
Thank you, Taylor. And it is such a question for our times.
We're
how
in
is
tumultuous times.
Yeah. How is our heart? And we need to care for them. This has been Wildflowers Live. We have talked about twin flames, wounded lovers, and the story Her. And this has been beautiful. And thank you again, Taylor, and for the folks who have joined us and for the folks who are joining us at some point in the future when they watch this as a recording. We do this every Sunday at 10 in the morning. Next week, we'll be reading Coffee with Cleo and Company, and that's going to be another very interesting ride. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you all soon. Much love to you guys.
Love you.
Love you.
Love you all.
Love you all.
Bye.